Cassata cake, a new way to eat gelato, and the triumph of the throat. This week, we're back in Palermo, Sicily.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. You found the place where we enjoy talking travel and food. Welcome. This week, we're back in Palermo with Enrica Bruno of Culinary Backstreets to talk about the desserts and sweets of Palermo, Sicily. But first, if you like travel and food, you should sign up for the Destination Eat Drink newsletter. Each month, I keep you up to date on the videos, foodie posts, and podcast episodes here at Destination Eat Drink headquarters. Sign up at destinationeatdrink.com, and thank you so much. Enrica Bruno is a foodie tour guide in Palermo for Culinary Backstreets and Alternative Tours Palermo. She was on the show last week. We talked about arancini, caponata, and the multicultural makeup of the city. But there's much, much more to Palermo. So I invited Enrica back, and this week we talk about convent suites, why you need to love ricotta in Palermo, and how street art is helping to revitalize the city center. Plus, it's Italy, so there's some yummy gelato talk. Okay, I'm starving, so let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Enrica Bruno from Culinary Backstreets, thank you so much for being back here. We had you on last week. We had such an amazing conversation about the food and the culture of Palermo. I wanted to have you back because there's so much more to talk about. Thanks for agreeing to come back this week.
Thank you. Yes, I know. So Palermo is a very complicated city. So we have many topics to talk about.
You're from Palermo. Sicilians love their sweets, so I'm sure that we're on the same page here, that we both love sweets. One thing that I always look for when I'm traveling through Portugal, every town has their own sweet, and a lot of them are convent sweets. They originated in the convents of Portugal, and there's some kind of egg, custard, and almond mixture usually. But that's in Portugal. Tell me about the convent sweets that we can discover in Palermo.
Yes, so desserts, sweets are really like a world here. I would say like a kingdom, when you go to a pastry shop. So you really take a lot of time to choose the pastry, the cake you want to try. And so you need more than probably 1 week to taste all the different sweets we offer. The convent sweets are a very old heritage. The main the most popular cakes you can taste in Palermo come from like a convent heritage. In Palermo, there is a very interesting pastry shop, which is located inside a convent. The name is Santa Caterina convent, and the name of the pastry shop is I Segreti del Chiostro, like the cloister secrets. It's like a hidden gem, like a hidden treasure located in the main highlights, in the main squares of Palermo Historical Center. It's interesting because this pastry shop was open in 2016 after more or less more than 50 years, more than more after 50 years. In the past, the nuns of that convent used to make fantastic pastries. Imagine that my grandmother, who is 90 today, remembers that the pastries every Sunday lunch came from Santa Caterina convent. And she always mentioned the name of a cake that I never tried, like Trionfo di gola, the triumph of the throat. And I always asked my grandmother, Nonna, what's that? I've never heard about this cake. Oh, she said, that was a fantastic pastries that we used to ask, just writing on a piece of paper the name and gave to the nuns through a turning wheel, because the convent was a cloistered convent. So the nuns couldn't be seen by people. So they used to prepare and to, sell the pastries through a wheel. And they couldn't even talk with people, because in that convent there was a very strict rule, the rule of silence. So the last nuns left the convent in 2014. There were only 3 nuns left, and the convent was too big for only 3 nuns, so they were moved somewhere else. And this place finally in 2016 became a public pastry shop. The nuns, before leaving, left them all the ancient recipes of their sweets. So finally in 2016 I was able to taste for the first time this fantastic cake called the Triumph of the Throat, which is like a spongy cake divided in different layers, stuffed with custard, nuts, pistachios, almonds, walnuts, and a little bit of marzipan. Marzipan is also, an important ingredient for the Sicilian pastries. So we eat, especially in November, the marzipan fruits that we call Martorana fruits, which were instead invented in the convent in front of Santa Caterina in the Martorana convent. So it came also from like a convent tradition. But the main ingredient for our pastry is the ricotta cheese. So if you don't like ricotta in Sicily, well, it's a problem. Okay. Yes, because when you go to a pastry shop, you cannot miss the chance to taste like a pastry with ricotta cheese. So of course, probably you know, but the world know the cannoli, which are these long like rolls stuffed with ricotta cheese. And in Palermo, the ricotta cheese is made with sheep milk, okay, not with cow milk, because we have more sheep than cows in this area of Sicily. And sheep ricotta cheese has much more flavor than the cow ricotta cheese. Or the cassata cake. So we have different varieties of cassata. Baked cassata, which is the most ancient cassata you can taste in Sicily, which is just like a short crust stuffed with ricotta cheese and chocolate chips. It's like a covered, cake and sprinkle at the end with icing sugar. It's very simple, that you can also find in the regular bakeries, and we can also taste as a breakfast. The Italian breakfast is extremely sweet. Or the traditional, cassata, la cassata tradizionale is instead like a spongy cake in two colors. It's green and white, because it's covered with marzipan and glazed, like a glazing sugar on top, stuffed again with ricotta cheese, and decorated, actually I would say wonderfully decorated with candied fruits.
Can I just say, I love the cassata. It's one of my favorite things, but I was just enchanted by this story that you told about the triumph of the throat cake, because I was just like young Enrica, because I had never heard of this before. And now you've told us about the triumph of the throat cake. And now I'm just, in my brain, I'm thinking, all right, when can I get to Palermo next to try the triumph of the cake? Because this is something that I've never tasted, and I've never even heard of until today. So thanks for sharing that. Before we get off the topic of sweets, we have to talk about gelato, because I love gelato. I was a gelato maker for several years here in the United States. And when I was in Sicily whenever I was in Sicily, I always loved getting gelato there because, well, one of the reasons is because the pistachio is my favorite flavor, and the pistachios in Sicily, the Bronte pistachios, are so good. And one thing that they do in Palermo that I loved was the gelato on the brioche bun, which is totally delicious and decadent. But my favorite place, since I've last been to Palermo, my favorite place, Brioschia, has since closed. So let's talk gelato, but you have to tell me at some point what your favorite place is, Enrica, so I have a new favorite place when I come to Palermo, because my favorite place closed.
Okay, that's not easy, because gelato is also is good everywhere here. Of course, I have my favorite spots, but it's harder to find bad gelato. Gelato is it's not easy to talk about gelato, because gelato is another world. I mean, you can find different, of course, we can eat gelato in different ways. So in a cup, in a cone, or, as you correctly said, in a brioche. It's like a sandwich. It's like a gelato sandwich. But our brioche is not like a flat brioche, but is, we say, a brioche cu tuppo. Tuppo is the bun, the small bun on top of a brioche. It's for us like a proper meal that usually we have lunch, especially in summertime, with the brioche con gelato. It's not easy to eat because you risk to, get very, very
it gets
dirty.
everywhere.
Exactly. So I always, when I'm with my customers, teach them how to eat the gelato brioche. But first of all, you need to take the bun on top of the brioche, and you need to use the bun as a spoon. Okay, so you need to take your gelato with this small tuppo, with this small bun. Then you eat your gelato, and in the meantime, you fold your brioche. So at the end, you will eat like a proper gelato sandwich. Okay. So in Palermo, the tradition of gelato is very old. Actually, the gelato was invented by the Arabs with the name sherbet, which is the sorbet. Okay, and in the past it was made with the snow from Mount Etna, from our volcano. Flavored with a little bit of like orange juice or lemon juice. The gelato became the gelato we mean today on the second half of the 17th century by Francesco Procopio de Coltelli, who used a very old machine that his father used for making the granita, the ice slush. And he mixed together with sugar and other, flavors. So in Palermo, if you can find a good gelato everywhere, is not the same as for the granita. Okay, so the granita is more for from the east coast of the island. So I always recommend in Palermo to taste more the gelato than the granita. We have many artisanal ice cream makers in Palermo who don't use the powder, the industrial powder, but they use the real ingredients. Okay, for example, pistachios. Well, pistachios, of course, pistachio is one of my favorite flavors. So I always order brioche with pistachio and nocciola, which is the hazelnut. Also, we grow many hazelnuts in Sicily. Pistachio is very famous because also pistachios were brought here by the Arabs, and for them pistachios became like the main income for several centuries. In fact, pistachios were known as the green gold of Sicily. So pistachio for sure is a flavor that you should try in a brioche, but we also have very, very, I would say, vintage flavor that we try to offer during our tours, because otherwise people don't find by themselves. For example, I don't know if you ever tried the jasmine flavor. The jasmine flavor is an amazing flavor that, again, my grandmother used to get when she was young. The jasmine, we have two main flowers in Sicily, jasmine and orange blossom. So in the past, in order to give flavor to like a healing water that they used to heal the viper bites, so the jasmine flowers were put in this very sour water, just to give more flavor and to give the possibility to have like a more pleasant drink as a medication. Then many ice cream makers decided to make a gelato with the jasmine flavor using the proper flowers of jasmine. And in the past, it was sprinkled a little bit with cinnamon. So today, very nice and very also refreshing flavor, especially in our very warm, summer evenings, for example, is having a brioche with, or a cone, if you don't want to get too full, with jasmine and cinnamon together. My favorite gelateria, I would say I have two favorite gelateria. One today is Il Signor di Carbognano. Actually, they are located in two different areas of the town. Il Signor di Carbognano is in the is near Brioscia, when Brioscia, your favorite gelateria, was near the Politeama Theater. So it's in the most elegant area of the town, in the where people used to go to shop, for example. And another very, very nice gelateria is instead in the historical center, and it's Roro, which is managed by a woman, which I like. It's a woman business. And this lady is still making the gelatos with the real ingredients, not with the industrial dust. And the powder, I mean, and she keeps the gelato in the pozzetti, we call. So when you go there, you don't see the the gelato in the trays, but in a sort of a steel cylinder with a lid on top, which was a very old-fashioned way to preserve better the gelato.
This is a really good tip, Enrica, because, one of the things about gelato is to sell a lot of gelato, you need to have it on display with these giant tubs of gelato overflowing with vibrant colors. The problem is, one, those vibrant colors are often dyes, they're not natural colors. And two, by having it on display like that, it goes bad quicker. When you have it in those cylinders with the lid on, you can't see it, but it keeps the gelato fresher and therefore tastes good, tastes better when you're buying it. So that's something that I think folks should look for when they come. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have the best gelato, but it's a really good sign if they have those cylinders with the lids on them. And thank you for that recommendation for jasmine sorbetto. I've never had that, and that'll be another reason why I have to come to Palermo in the not too distant future. Let's talk about the art of puppetry in Sicily. I was taken the first time I went to Sicily because there's all these displays of puppets, and I didn't realize what it was when I first got there. I thought, oh, isn't this is cute? But it's really a part of the culture. And I've gone to puppet shows in Sicily. They're not just for kids. They're entertaining, but they're not just for kids. They're a real art form, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They are very funny, not only for kids, but for the adults. It's a great heritage that we all we should all keep alive, because it's almost disappearing. In Palermo, in the past, there were 40 puppet theaters. Today there are only 4 left. So I always feel like a mission when I tell people about the tradition of puppets. Also the puppet shows, but also the art of making the Sicilian puppets is like a family tradition. And those families have troubles to survive sometimes, because with the with Netflix, with the TV series, so people of course don't go to the puppet theaters anymore. So it's a tradition that was that dates back the end of the 19th century. And Palermo puppets are very, very big, are like more than 1 meter, more or less. They are 1 meter and 20 centimeter tall, so pretty tall. They are knights. Usually the stories are about two cousins, Orlando and Rinaldo, who fight for the love of the same woman, Angelica. In the past, the puppeteer used to play their shows in the public squares, and and it was actually I wasn't born yet, but I think it would have been amazing, because I always try to imagine all the people gather in a square. There was usually the father who was giving the voice to all the characters of the shows, helped by the oldest son, who was moving the antagonist usually, and usually there was always the young son of the family who used to play a piano, which was very easy to do because it was like a wheel piano. While the puppets are extremely heavy because are in the structure is in wood, and they are covered with armor. So only a strong man could move a very heavy puppet. When the father became too old, so too weak to move the puppets, he used to go back and play the piano. And the young son used to take his place because he became stronger to move the heaviest puppets. So it was like a circle, So today it's not easy to keep this tradition alive. I always trying to talk, or even to go and see not only like a puppet show, but go to a puppet studio, and to see how to make a puppet, which is not like just an handicraft job, but it's an art. It's a proper art. Because they are everything. They are carpenters because they need to cut the wood, because each part of the body of the puppets is assembled piece by piece. And they usually make the armors, so they design all the armors. They design all the crest for every single character. They make the clothes, they paint the faces, some of those families are still using the glass eyes, so the eyes are not just painted but are stuck inside the wood with glass. So it's a very accurate technique, and it is also related with food. How? In which way? I told you at the beginning, everything in this city is related with food. So
puppets and food, how does that work?
Puppets and food, how? Exactly, because on the Day of Dads, which is here we celebrate on the 2nd of November, there is the tradition of making and buy the sugar puppets. So we make the same puppets but in sugar, and it's usually it's a bit bizarre almost to say, but the Day of Dads, it's a feast for kids here in Palermo. It's usually it's sometimes more important than Christmas. And it's a very nice tradition. On the night between the 1st and the 2nd of November, all the kids used to hide underneath the bed an empty bucket. Because at night, the grandparents from the heaven will come to bring them some sweets, some toys and some sweets. So on the 2nd of November in the morning, they go and see what the grandparents brought them during the night. But the basket is not underneath the bed anymore, but it is hidden somewhere in the house. So they start, all the kids start like a treasure hunting to look for this basket, and they can find like in the shower or behind a curtain, and they find this basket full of sweets and sugar puppets. So it's like a gift that the grandparents or the great-grandparents who passed away brought them during the night.
What a great story. Before I let you go, Enrica, I want to talk about street art. I think you do a street art tour. Is that correct?
Yes,
you take
I do.
guests to see street art. I'm a big fan of street art, but I think for when Americans come to Europe and to maybe Sicily in particular, they see it as just graffiti, just like vandalism on the buildings. And I'm constantly having to point out to when my friends come to visit me in Europe, no, this is a legitimate art form, and look at it as art when you're looking at it. I think that perception, that stereotype maybe is beginning to change a little bit, but for a long time, I think folks looked at it as something that was bad. And now people are asking these artists to come in and decorate their buildings, at least in some places where I've lived. What's your experience with street art in Palermo?
So sadly, you are right. I mean, in Palermo, there are many graffitis. So when we say graffitis, we mean, those no sense writings that just
tagging and stuff.
Tag, exactly. So without any, social message or important message. And sadly, there are still many in Palermo. But in fact, during my street art tours, I always make a difference between the graffitis and the street art. I mean, the murals that proper, international artists painted here in Palermo. So you can find the best street art murals in Palermo in La Calza neighborhood, but also near Ballaro Market. So mainly in the historical center of Palermo. Because street art is a way to give colors and also to in a certain way revalue an area that suffered a lot during the centuries. The historical center of Palermo has been bombed in 1943 during the World War II, and the 80% of the historical center of Palermo was destroyed. So for several years, people didn't live in the historical center. People didn't go to the historical center of Palermo. I didn't go to the historical center of Palermo. So I'm 37, and when I was a child, I didn't go there, because there was nothing to do. There was nothing to see. It was also a little bit dangerous to walk around. The restoration of the historical center dates back the end of the 90s, so around the 1996 and 1998, more or less. So more or less 15 years ago, finally, many buildings, noble palaces, monuments have been restored, and many international street artists came to Palermo to to decorate, to leave like art message, which is also like a social message, which is strictly related to the history of the town, to the past, the present, the evolution of this town. So in Palermo, the street art topics, for example, are not like international topics, like about the global heating, for example. No, in Palermo, street art is connected to the history of the town. So we have many murals that just talk about the destruction, the bombing. Other street art murals that talk about the multiculturalism of the melting pot of the town. We also mentioned during our conversation today. Others that are like a homage to the judges who fought against the mafia, for example. So it's also like a very interesting way, like a different perspective to talk about the history of Palermo.
It's fascinating because I think what you're saying is the street art reflects the culture of Palermo, and it's much like what we've been talking about, that food also reflects the culture. So I think that ties everything up together really, really nicely. Enrica Bruno, thank you so much for being with us today on Destination Eat Drink. We'll have links to you personally and to Culinary Backstreets. If folks want to take a tour, they can get in touch with you directly. They can also book through Culinary Backstreets to do so. Thank you so much for being here today. This has just been a fascinating and enlightening conversation about one of my favorite places in the world, Palermo, Sicily.
Thank you to you, and I'm waiting for you here.
Okay, that's the charming Enrica Bruno. Now, you might think that a food tour is just about eating as much food as you can possibly pile into your face over a few hours, but my experience has been that the guides on food tours not only know a ton about the cuisine of their city, but so much about history and culture. And like I always say, food is culture, culture is food. The two are tied together, and Enrica certainly proves that point. You can learn more about Enrica's tours at alternativetourspalermo.it or culinarybackstreets.com. Or you can get a link in the show notes at radiomisfits.com/DED248. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, carb loading with an episode all about bread with focaccia barese, cat's head biscuits, and making a loaf for a rock and roll star. So don't miss that. Until then, get over to destinationeatdrink.com. There's so much foodie travel stuff there. I just published a video about the great food and sights in Lulé, Portugal. Plus, I get a bloody nose. You'll find out why. You won't see any blood. Don't worry about that. But you can see the video at destinationeatdrink.com by clicking on the video tab or by going to youtube.com/@DED946. I also just posted a story about Cordoba's Mosque Cathedral. It's a great site in Cordoba, and that's at destinationeatdrink.com/blog. And while you're there, sign up for the newsletter, and maybe if you're feeling generous, drop a couple of bucks my way. Just hit the contribute button, and thank you very, very much. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and a guy who hides a bottle of scotch for the Day of the Dead. Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson. I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.